Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel, Digital Scribe, where everything is information. Today, I will try to connect all the dots in one broadcast here. Connecting the dots. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, as you can see, I'm going to put my flow of the flow of life, pattern of everything. What do you mean by the pattern of everything? Well, here we go. We got the word frequency, we have resonance, the law of supply and demand. What? Flow or movement, law of diffusion, law of attraction, quantum entanglement, the observer effect, feedback loop, agreement, focus, synchronicity, law of unity. Okay. And then what I'm equating these, now you'll see this too, is frequency equals information equals resonance equals vibration. Again, we're connecting these four things together: frequency, information, resonance, and vibration. They seem to be different terminologies, but they all function in the same grouping. Now, I'm going to try to break it down and make it very simple. So we'll go back up to the first one. Frequency. What is that? That's sort of like a sine wave here. Let me get back to something here more simple. As you could see, frequency is how many times per second. In other words, when you're looking at this chart here, you're seeing gamma rays, which is, let me back up. This is the electromagnetic spectrum, starting with the lowest radio waves, like your AM band, like 1 kilohertz here, like your AM radio. And then as you get up to the 10 to the 6, which is megahertz right here, this is your FM radio band frequency. And down here is AM. Now, what's the difference? The difference is how many times per second that the electromagnetic wave is oscillating. Okay. And the higher you get up in here, you get up to like up in this frequency range, you have your telephones, your cell phones and stuff. And then when you get up into this range here, you have microwaves. When you throw your food in the microwave oven to cook stuff, you're cooking stuff and it's being bombarded by the same magnetic spectrum, but a higher frequency. In other words, it's happening more times per second than down there in radio waves, like your AM band, your FM band, your cell phone, your TV, back in the day, UHF TV, ultra high frequencies, it's up in this range here. And then when you get up to microwaves, it has more energy because the higher the frequency is, the more energy that frequency has. And then when you go above microwaves, you get into the spectrum of infrared. You know that little control that you use to turn on and turn off your TV with the infrared? That's in this band. And this is the light that you can't see, but it's there. And it's mainly emitted by heat signatures. When they have like infrared to look at things, actually the heat is emitting that infrared frequency. Again, it's a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's all the same thing. Radio waves, microwaves, infrared, it's all the same electromagnetic spectrum, but the difference is how many times per second is happening. And that's what makes it a different part of reality. Then, of course, when it gets high enough, when it gets above infrared, now you can see how it's sliced off here. You see the low end of the visible light, that's red, darkish red. And as you go higher up in frequency, it changes color, just like the rainbow. And then when you get up to like purple, that's the highest frequency of light that we can see. Then when you go beyond that, you can't see that light. It's sort of like how humans can't hear high frequencies, but animals, like especially dogs, can hear it. And that's what it is. It's a higher frequency that our eye cannot pick up. That's called ultraviolet light. Okay. And then when you go above that, a higher frequency yet is X rays. And remember what I said, the higher the frequency, the more energy. That's the reason why people wear those lead suits and stuff to cover themselves, because those X rays can physically damage cells. And then even above that is gamma rays. So depending on what frequency you set that electric magnet, it can actually change its physical manifestation within reality. But it's all a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, the human eye resonates or is tuned to just see this spectrum here. And as you go down here, the human eye has three different cones. The one that says red, green, and blue, instead of looking at it as colors, this red cone is the one that looks at the lower bandwidth. The green looks in the middle, and the blue looks at the higher bandwidth. To make it more sensible, you know how you have a radio, you have the bass, you have the mid, and then you have the treble. So if you want to hear more bass, you turn up the low end, and it makes that more louder. Same way with light. It's all frequency. I'll get to the sound frequency yet in a minute. And as you know, with the variation of red, blue, and green, you could produce all the other colors. That's the reason why, for example, when you look up here, if light is just down here, then these two cones will not pick that up because it's out of its frequency range. But if the light is up in the green spectrum, the red will not pick it up, nor will the blue. But if you get up to the bluer spectrum, it will not only it'll pick up the blue, but not the red and the green. Now, when you're seeing the yellow, actually what you're seeing a combination of an even amount of red and an even amount of green with no blue. And that's kind of in this area. And if you go lower, it gets more orangey, which dominates more with the red than the green. And then when you get real high up here in the purple, you're actually seeing that it's some that you have to understand the sum and the difference in the two original frequencies, which I'm not going to get into. It's a little technical. But just know that these little cones are tuned to pick up that particular frequency. Just like your FM radio, getting back up in here, your FM radio, when you listen to, let's say, 88.3, there's a certain station that you like. In Orlando, it's a Christian radio station called Z88.3. So when you tune in that frequency, you're tuning your radio receiver to pick up or hear or see that particular frequency. Even though you got all these different radio stations throughout, like from like 89, 104, 106, 100, all those different radio stations, they're all out there. All those frequencies are out there. But the only reason why they exist, or you know that they're there, because you have something that could detect or tune into that. So when you tune in your radio to that certain frequency or your TV to that certain channel, it's only tuned to pick up that particular frequency. Just like your eye. Your eye can only, these three separate cones can only pick up a certain amount of frequency, the spectrum, okay? And depending on what they're tuned to, like for example, this red light, let's say that's tuned to radio station 700, right? Then it's only picking up the red. But if you tune to the radio station 500, you're only picking up the channel 500. So I'm trying to make this a broad understanding. And then even when you get down to the human ear, okay? Oh, before I get to that, now even in your computer screen or your cell phone screen or your digital watch or whatever, you would see these three little colors, red, blue, and green. Look at that. So what is, with the combination of these three little pixels, like I said, if they're all turned off, it's black. It produces no light. So that's how you get black on your screen. And then if all these three colors are lit up with the same intensity, it produces white light that you see here. And then if there are a variation of colors, like you got like a lot of red, a little bit of green, and a little bit of blue, you'll get another color yet still. And the variation of these three colors is what produces all the colors in the spectrum, like the rainbow spectrum there. And it's ironic that your eye only has these three receptors that receives these three different color lights. So basically we created something that the human eye could detect with sheer resolution. That's why you see reality, or when you're watching a picture on a screen or a video, it's a total reproduction of what you're seeing with your human eye. And when you get down to the pixel, this is one pixel. This is what it really is. And if you don't believe me, put a drop of water on your computer screen or on your cell phone, and you'll see the three primary colors right there. You'll see it. So that's how that is produced, to see all the colors of the spectrum. Now this is about light. This is about the electromagnetic spectrum here. Okay. Now, just our eyes are in a sense like a radio receiver, but we only receive this particular small frequency up here. Okay. So if our eyes were tuned to down this range, we can actually see radio waves and stuff, but we can't. We're only tuned to this small part of the spectrum here. Okay. Now, let's get down to the human ear. This is another one of our sense, the human ear. As you see, the vibrations in the sound is produced by audio frequency, and all that is vibration in the ear. And when you have a lower frequency, like a bass guitar, that vibrates at 20, 30, or 100 times per second, is called hertz. Hertz means how many times per second is vibrating. And if you hear like a guitar or a high pitch, it's in the 1,000 hertz range or a couple thousand hertz range. That's a higher pitch still. Okay. Now, how your ear works is very simple. Of course, God is the engineer of all this, but he uses the same pattern. And what I mean is your ear takes in the sound. It shakes this anvil. Let me blow up this picture a little bit because it looks like a little hard to see. We'll crank that up to like 400 here. All right, here we go. Let's hope it doesn't get pixelated. Okay. Now, as you see in the human ear, sound comes in here. It shakes this eardrum, shakes this bone, shakes this other bone. This is called a stirrup. And what that does, it vibrates in here, down here in the coglia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it, but along this little circular thing, looks like a snail, you have little hair fibers. Looks like hair fibers, and each one's tuned to a particular sound frequency. Down here, it's tuned to like 20 hertz, 30, 40. And the farther you get up in there, it's smaller and only resonates or shakes to a particular frequency. Just like, those little crystal glasses. When somebody sings into it, when they hit the right note, that they shatter it, that glass is tuned to a particular frequency, just like your radio station. And when you hit that particular frequency of that crystal glass, it starts vibrating it and shakes it. And of course, it can't maintain the structure, therefore it's shattered because it's on the same frequency. It's not so much a volume, but it's being on that same frequency. And each one of them little internal hairs, as they would call it, vibrates at a certain frequency. So therefore, that's transmitted into the auditory nerves and carried to the brain. So again, you just think of it as a whole bunch of different frequencies that it listens to, and only a particular frequency will vibrate that particular part of the cilium, which is called a hair cell there in the coglia. And of course over here, the tiny hair cells of the coglia are set in motion by vibration. The vibration stimulates a tiny nerve cell and sends it to the auditory part of the brain. So again, just like the human eye, the ear is set up to pick up sound vibrations. But when I'm talking about frequency, now I'm going to pull in resonance into this, because the way food cooking in the microwave is all at resonance. When you tune into a particular frequency, you're resonating that frequency, and that's called resonance. And when you're at that frequency, it's got maximum energy, and therefore that's what you see. It becomes reality. Okay? Let me bring this back down again to 200. We'll read on here. I don't know if I'm going too fast or too slow, but anyhow, comments are always welcome here. Okay. And this is all in the notes here. I'm probably going to post this up. Resonance, the definition of resonance is maximum energy occurring at its particular frequency. So when you tune into that radio station, when you're tuning in, you're resonating at that frequency, which is called resonance. And therefore, when you're resonating with the red color, it's putting out that maximum frequency at that color. That way you could see red, or the TV channel, or the FM radio. Okay? And when reality is manifested, it's manifested by one or more of the five senses. I'm going to spin off here for a minute here. When you perceive reality, how are you perceiving it? You're perceiving it through sight. You're perceiving it through sound. You're perceiving it through touch, taste, and smell. Well, just like in the ear that is tuned to whatever frequency is vibrating in the air, it's just like your human eye that's tuned to a particular light frequency that's tuned to it, because those little receptors in your eye called cones, they're all tuned to a specific frequency or a band of frequencies. Same with your ear. So they're tuned, so they're constantly listening for that light frequency, or they're listening to that sound frequency. And when you hit that particular frequency or vibration, it activates that, and then it sends an electrical impulse to the optic nerve to see it, or the auditory nerve to hear it. And now when we talk about the olfactory lobe, about smelling, in the olfactory lobe, your nose has these senses that are tuned to a particular molecule, like the smell of perfume, the smell of gasoline, the smell of rotten food. Each one of those foods or odors have a particular molecule. Same way with your nose and the olfactory lobe. Those cells are tuned to only activate or light up, as you would say, when that particular molecule is there. So when it's smelling something nice like a rose, only this particular few cells of millions of cells in your old nose will only activate that. Thus, it fires up nerve and it gets sent to your brain, and then you're sensing that smell. Or if it's a smell of gasoline, again, only particular cells in your nose will only be tuned or resonating with the smell of the gasoline molecules, thus activating it and sending a message to your brain saying, oh, it's gasoline in the air. And that's how it works. And the same way with your tongue. Your tongue detects sweetness, detects bitter taste, salty taste, and all that. Again, the cells are only tuned when the presence of that molecule is there to pick up that particular sense. So that's what it is with the taste buds. And even your nerve cells detects heat and cold the same way. Certain cells are more activated when it's cold and more activated when heat. And then again, the information sent to the human brain through your nerves, right? So, what I'm trying to say here, this every part of your organ in your body is tuned to pick up a certain presence of a molecule, and you can also say that's resonance too. Even though the molecule isn't particular frequency, but that's the reason why I call everything information, because that's information, just like optics, just like auditory. Everything is information. So even the presence of those molecules is giving your brain information. And the thing about the human body is your whole perception of reality is being carried to your brain by these nerves. All your nerves, your optic nerve, your auditory nerve, the nerves that operate your that transmit the information from your skin, the olfactory lobe nerves that transmits the different molecules being picked up by your olfactory lobe cells, transmit to your brain. It's all transmitted by electrical impulses. So if you really want to question your reality, all your reality is being fed to your brain by these 5 different impulses. Now, I like to call them 5 different language: the language of the sight, the language of the sound, the language of the taste, the language of the smell, and the language of the feeling hot and cold, and the feeling of something. There are actually 5 different languages that are coming to your brain. And what your brain does, each part of your brain, like the occipital lobe interprets the visual, there's a part of your brain interprets the signal and converts it from the hearing, and it all gets sent to your neocortex, is where you do your thinking. So your perception of reality is being interpreted by the front end of your brain. I'm not talking the physical front end, but I'm talking about the first interface between your senses and your thinking part. So it's all interpretation, and how your brain is trained is through repetition, and then it's stored in your memory. But again, you kind of see the pattern, the theory of all things. Like I was getting back to that one point. Let me get back to that document here, where I was talking about frequency and resonance. Frequency is how many times per second, and resonance is where it's tuned in at frequency. Okay. So that's why I was trying to make a point that your human body is tuned to. And again, your eyes could see a part of the electromagnetic spectrum there. Okay. And then let me get back to another thing. I'm not going to cover everything tonight, but let's get back to the law of supply and the law of supply and demand. Now, this is an interesting thing. Now, how does this work into everything? You ask me, right? People say, well, if you have something for sale and you have a lot of it and people don't really want it, then you have a lot of supply but no demand. So the value goes down, correct? But if you have just a very little quantity of some and people really, because it's only a limited quantity, like it's limited supply, then there's a big demand for it. Works for real estate, works for stocks. When people feel like the stock doesn't have any value, don't want to sell it off, and the price goes down and there's not much of a demand. And that's a law of supply and demand. And it also works with, let me pull a Bible principle, where, when Jesus leaves the 99 who are saved and goes after that lost one, the thing is there's a big supply of the saved, but then there's one that's missing. So he'll leave the 99 to go after one, because that one is not saved, and there's a big demand to bring that back into the fold. Or the pearl that was where a man bought a field just to find that pearl, that one lost pearl. Again, because there's a lack of it, there's a great demand for it. This works in relationships, law of supply and demand. If you have a friend that you see every day and night, you see him all the time, you talk to him all the time, you kind of like, I'm not going to say you get tired of the person, but after a while, you don't really value it too much because you have it all the time. But then that same person, if you haven't seen them for months, then of course when you meet that person, you value it because you had limited contact, limited relationship with that person. So then it gains value because it's a limited supply of that. And even like the multi-millionaires, they have such a vast amount of money or cash. If they dropped a $10 bill or they spend a couple hundred here, it's like nothing to them. But the poor man who barely has like $50 in his account, and he doesn't have any money to pay his rent because of COVID-19, of course, they lost their job and they're still waiting for the unemployment check. Although they got a stimulus check, but that went really quick as well. But because they don't have really much money at all, that same $100 would be so much in demand. They would appreciate that much more than the man who's a millionaire or has all the money, because the millionaire has a big supply of it, but the poor man doesn't have much of it, and that money becomes valuable. So again, that's another example, supply and demand. Now let's get into electronics. You know how a battery works? A good fully charged battery will have a whole bunch of electrons piled up on the minus side and nothing on the plus side. So when you hook a wire or light bulb, the electrons are always one to go from the where it's a big supply of it, and they'll rush to the other end, which is the plus side, where there's nothing, because that plus side has no electrons, so it has a big demand to pull on the supply of the negative electron. So it pulls them across. That's how you have power. Same with your human body. You know that if you hold your breath, what happens? After 20 or 30 seconds, you'll have this great urge to breathe in and breathe out, because what's happening is you're getting, your body, your blood is building up with carbon dioxide, which is being released in your lungs. So it's a great supply of carbon dioxide, but very little oxygen, and your body needs that oxygen because there's such a limited supply of oxygen for the moment in your lungs. There's a big demand for it. So what your body wants to do, it wants to get rid of the carbon dioxide by exhaling, and then take that nice big deep breath, because you held your breath for a long time, and pull it in, because your body demands that oxygen simply because there's a big lack of it. And then if you hyperventilate, now you're getting a total supply of oxygen. So now there's not much of a demand by your body to have oxygen. And then you can hold your breath for about a minute or a minute and a half because you're hyperventilated. You've oxygenated your body. So now at that moment, there's not a demand for it. And that's how it works. So that's a simple thing. Same with the kidneys, same with the liver, same with the pancreas and everything. All these organs work the same way. The law of supply and demand. And that's how it works. That's the reason why, in these other cultures, they have what's called the yin yang. There's always a negative and a positive or whatever. But that's because of that supply and demand. It goes back and forth. It oscillates. That's what your body's doing. It's oscillating between carbon dioxide and oxygen. It goes back and forth. You breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide. It's a cycle, just like a sine wave. Let me show you something about a sine wave, because this is a part of that supply and demand. I believe I have that. No, I don't. Okay, we'll have to go back to, it's on the other sheet. While I get this up. Whoops, wrong one. Okay, you see how these sine waves are? I think I got a better view of that. Hold on. Okay, now you see the sine wave here? This is a representation of frequency. And this is time going across. So from here to here is like one cycle or 1 hertz. But as you notice, this end has a big supply of a whole bunch here, right? So once it reaches to the max, there's plenty of supply and no demand. But down here, since it's a huge supply and there's a great demand for it, it starts reducing. It didn't get transferred down here. And then this has a big supply, but up here has demand, because if the sine wave is down here, there's nothing here. So there's a big demand up here. So what happens? The negative, it gets pushed back up here to meet the supply up here. And again, once the supply has plenty of supply up here of power, guess what? There's nothing down here. So again, it pulls it down. It's that they call it the yin yang, but I just call this the law of flow because things are always moving. And Nikolai Tesla's saying, if you know what energy, frequency, and vibration, you'll understand what things are. And I'll give you a picture of Nikolai Tesla. Here's the guy. If you want to find the secret of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Energy is called resonance because when you're at resonance, you have maximum energy. Okay. And frequency, we talked about that. And frequency and vibration are pretty much the same thing. How many times per second? And this is what he discovered. And he is the father of alternating current, which is represented by the sine wave going back and forth. This is the amplitude. In other words, the louder your sound is, the greater the amplitude, the quieter the sound, the less this will be closer to this line. This line represents 0 or nothing. So again, when it's at this part, there's plenty of supply here and nothing here. So down here is a big demand right now for that to pull down. So it's pulling that down. But then once it's a maximum supply here, there's a demand up here. So then it goes up and down, like a roller coaster. Okay. So but again, that's a part of the law of supply and demand. And that's the essential of frequency. That I'm telling you, I'm connecting all these dots, but it's a universal unit. And again, with this law of supply and demand, we'll get back to the screen. Supply and demand, you have flow or movement. Now, check this out. What does cash flow, what does electron flow or power, electricity, and blood flow have in common? Oh, glad you asked that question. Well, what they have in common is the law of flow. They're constantly moving. And if they're not moving, it's dead. It doesn't exist. In other words, say your heart stops beating, guess what? The blood doesn't flow anymore, right? If the blood doesn't flow, means none of the organs gets the oxygen, none of the organs gets the uric acid taken out because the kidneys do that. None of the organs are doing an exchange of what they're supposed to do. And then the whole body starts to die. Especially the brain will die first because it requires a lot more oxygen, a lot more energy to run the brain than any other organ in the body. But even if you have a heart-lung machine running where your lungs aren't breathing, your heart isn't pumping, but if the heart-lung machine is oxygenating the blood and removing the carbon dioxide and moving it through the body, guess what? You're golden. In other words, your body's alive. All the organs are functioning just fine because the blood is moving. But once that flow gets inhibited, clogged arteries, you can't run as far, you run out of breath because your body's unable to circulate that blood, especially to your heart. And if your heart doesn't get enough oxygen through blood flow, which the red blood cells exchange the oxygen with the cells in the heart muscle, then it starts starving and starts feeling the chest pains. So that's all the flow in the blood. So long as the blood is moving, flowing, you have life. But when it's not moving, it's dead. Now, same with cash flow. You could be into a whole lot of debt, but as long as you're able to buy stuff and able to sell stuff, as long as the money is able to move within your account, you're good. You could be in a whole bunch of debt. You could owe all these credit cards, but as long as you're able to move the money, to spend it and move it, and if they give you more credit, then that keeps your cash moving. But once you don't have a job anymore, you can't spend money, then your local economy is dead, your personal economy. And again, with the old COVID-19, we're seeing it now. People are not working, okay? Businesses are not open to sell stuff, therefore, to bring in money, which is cash flow. Businesses still have to pay for the electric, the utilities, the rent of the building, and the employees. So now they can't have the employees work for them because there's no movement of cash. They don't have any cash to pay. So the cash flow has stopped, thus causing the business to go into what I would call like a heart attack state, right? All these businesses, small and large, are experiencing like a heart attack or almost like a near death experience because the business isn't technically dead forever. It's temporarily dead. So this is why the federal government will release a stimulus check to send that money to those businesses. So it sort of like put them on life support. They'll still have cash flow, just like the heart and lung machine for the human body. Same with the cash flow in the business. The federal government is giving out these loans or giving out these stimulus checks. And what it does is stimulates the cash flow, which keeps life, one, in the business economy and also in your personal finance. You still have life. You could pay your bills or buy your food, buy your gas, because you're able to spend money again because the government has put your finances on a heart lung machine. It's keeping the money moving. That's why they're doing it. And they have to do it because if that doesn't work, then guess what? Business go out of business, then the whole economy stops, and then the federal government winds up falling apart and stuff. Now, the third one I mentioned was power, electricity, electron flow. I explained to a little bit with that battery. As long as you have a good battery, the negative is full of electrons and the positive doesn't have any. But what happens is the electrons are moving from negative to positive. They're flowing. You have what's called current flow. That's where they coined the term currency, because as money is flowing from negative, as power is flowing from the negative side to the positive side, electrons are physically moving through that wire, producing power. But when your battery gets weak or it goes dead, when it's dead, what's happened? There's the same amount of electrons on the negative side as far as the plus side. It comes up to equilibrium or balance, and therefore no more flow. The battery is dead. And how you charge a battery is very opposite. You're forcing the electrons to leave the positive side and being turned back into the negative side, thus charging it. And that's why when you look at your cell phone, you see the battery, you see how much percentage of battery you have, because what's happening when you hook the charger up to it, depending on how strong the drain is how little battery you have. But when your charger feels there's no drain on it, it'll say 100%. When your phone says 2%, it's got maximum drain on it. So therefore it knows where your battery's at all times. Again, very simple. Electron flow. If it's not moving, there's no power. You got nothing. And when you flick that switch on your light switch and you flick it, you break the contact and the electrons cannot flow. Therefore, there's no power and you won't get electrocuted. So that's part of the things of the pattern of everything. So we got frequency, which is motion. We got resonance, which is the energy which comes being tuned in particular frequency. Because if you think about it, your perception of everything, even though your ear hears 20,000 hertz, each certain note has a certain frequency resonates. So people who can't hear high frequencies, to their world, their whole world sounds muffled. And same thing with people with certain color blindness. They may only see certain colors because those other frequencies they cannot receive because they're not working. And even with your attention, your focus, which I'll get to in a moment, but getting back to the law of the flow or movement, that's a part of that supply and demand, part of frequency. Everything is moving. Your molecules are moving. Your planet's moving. Everything is moving. Even God moves by cloud by day and fire by night in the Old Testament. Everything is moving. That's why when you see a revival, that nobody should camp at it, because God's always moving on to something new. And the law of diffusion is going from a more concentrated area into the lesser concentrated area. Quick synopsis of that is, if you have food dye, you put a drop of red food dye into your water. Guess what? That red food dye gets pulled apart, and you cannot see it because all the molecules are going from a high concentration, which is in that one drop, it's getting ripped apart to diffuse throughout the rest of it. And that's how the oxygen is exchanged from your red blood cell to your alveoli, your lung cell, the cell that's in your lung. What happens, the capillaries get so close that the oxygen molecule diffuses out of the blood cell, because diffuses from the alveoli, which is concentrated oxygen, and goes into the red blood cell because that's lacking oxygen. It's picking that up. And that's getting rid of the carbon dioxide molecule because there's abundance of it in that red blood cell, thus going into the lungs. So again, that's called law of diffusion. So again, law of diffusion states that it's going from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. And that's the same way with heat and cold. You know, when something's warm, again, this is part of motion or movement. The molecules, when they're hot, they vibrate a lot more. Like water becomes steam when you see it boil in a pot. Those molecules, those water molecules, are moving at a very high speed. Of course, when a higher frequency or a higher rate of the motion of molecule, it's more energy, and the energy is known as heat. But when you cool it down, becomes water. When you really cool down, becomes ice. What happens is water molecules start slowing down, and then they slow down to a point where they stop. Technically, metaphorically stop, become ice. They become hard because they're no longer moving. They're not liquid anymore because it's colder, because the heat or the energy has been pulled out of it, and now it's slowing down. And then getting to like the absolute zero, which is when you're at absolute zero, technically there's no molecular motion. But technically you can't get down to absolute zero because that's impossible. You can never take all the energy or the heat out of something. You might get down to nano or millikelvin or nanokelvin. That's like 1/1000th of a degree above absolute zero, but you can never achieve absolute zero. So technically, the molecules are always moving, and that's another thing. Since they're moving, that's resonance, and that's what creates reality. Reality is actually manifestation of reality is resonance, because at resonance, it's revealed. At resonance is manifestation of reality here. So that's called movement. And movement is moving back and forth, supply and demand. At diffusion is movement as well, going from the abundance, which goes back into the law of supply and demand, because there's a very small amount of that little eye drop of color dye, and there's a great demand of it because there's a vacuum of it within the rest of the water molecule. It will pull on it real hard because there's big demand for it because there's a little supply. But once it gets through the water, it kind of looks like disappears because its molecules are all distributed evenly, and it comes to rest. And that's called diffusion. Now, let's look at the law of attraction. Now, law of attraction, it kind of goes back into frequency resonance. Frequency and resonance, in other words, for example, we have two auto mechanics, right? This is going into the psychological realm. Two auto mechanics, they have the same field, they have the same interest, the same skills. So guess what? When they get together, they have a lot to talk about because it's the same information. You could say that they're resonating They're resonating together because they have the same likes and same understanding. So they're at the same frequency. So therefore, they have a lot in common, and they're talking, they're bonding. It's like they already know each other. Now, put a doctor in with an auto mechanic. Your doctor, let's say, is at radio station 88.3. The auto mechanic's at station 104.6, right? Two different frequencies, right? Will you think they resonate? No. The only way you achieve resonance or unity is to be on the same frequency or the same information. But since they're two different people, they're not going to have much to talk about as far as what they do for a living. Doctor can't relate to a mechanic, and a mechanic can't relate to a doctor. The only thing he can relate on is the mechanic would relate to a doctor. Hey, doc, I have this sickness or this symptom. And the doctor say, yeah, my car has this problem, this. That's the only way they can relate, because they have to relate on the other person's frequency or turn. In other words, the doctor has to tune up to the auto mechanic's frequency, or the auto mechanic has to tune down to the doctor's frequency. But when the auto mechanic tunes down to the doctor's frequency, he's out of his circle of influence. He's out of his habitat, his pool, his residence. So he's going to be not feeling very comfortable, especially talking medical terms. That doctor, he'll be like totally out of his league, as they would say. So that's called the law of attraction. You know, when people meditate on a certain thing, they bring more of it, you know, and I'm sure you people out there understand the law of attraction. And so, in other words, whatever you focus or meditate on or believe, you'll bring more of that to yourself. Likes, you know, they say opposites attract, but likes is called the law of unity. In other words, you'll birds of a feather flock together. You all heard of that, right? Well, basically what it is, it's a law of attraction. It's a law of unity, actually. You get more energy, more power when you're amongst your same kind. For example, when you have like a Mandela affected community, you have the Bible community, you have the flat earth community, you have the round earth community, you have the conspiracy community, you have the Democratic Party, you have the Republican Party. Each one of these groups of people have something in common. They're on a particular frequency. The Democrats have a different frequency or a different channel than the Republicans, different information. Do you think that those two parties will resonate together? Absolutely not, because they're on two different frequency. But the people in the Republican Party, what they believe is the same thing. So since they're at the same thing, they're unified, and that unification is resonance. They're resonating together because they're on the same page, right? Same with the Democrats. The Democrats, they're resonating at a different frequency, like a radio station like 106.3, the Democrats, and the Republicans at 98.3. There are two different frequencies, but they're resonating together within themselves. And at resonance, more people who get on board in the same group, the greater the movement, the stronger, the more momentum the people have, and they're resonating with that same information. And that's the reason why when you detune from one to another, you switch channel, you get a whole different information. One believes one thing, another believes another. And that's called the law of attraction. They attract. Republicans will attract more Republicans. Democrats will attract more Democrats. The flat earthers will attract flat earthers. The round earthers will attract round earthers, so on. And then you got groups together like the Mandela affected Christians who are serving Christ, but yet they believe and know the Mandela effect. That's another group. They got two different frequencies that they can resonate on. But when they come together, it becomes more individualized. So that's called the law of attraction. You bring more to yourself. Same with money and stuff. Okay. And then now we go down to quantum entanglement. This is the entanglement that's in quantum mechanics. So in a nutshell, in the quantum entanglement, if you have two particles and they're quantumly entangled, what does that mean? Well, the information on one particle is equal to the other information. What you do to one, you instantly change the other. It doesn't matter if it's across the universe or right next to each other, because they're on the same frequency and they're at resonance. So essentially they're unified, those two particles, therefore they're quantumly entangled. Again, we're connecting the dots of all these terminologies I'm putting up there, okay? This is all interactive with each other. And of course, you got the observer effect. What does that mean? This is really neat. I like the observer effect because everything is a wave of probability, as you will know in quantum mechanics, but only it's observed that that wave of probabilities collapse to one outcome. So, like, in other words, your focus, your attention is tuning into a particular frequency, and once you observe it, you're causing it to resonate at that frequency, and you're collapsing all the other probabilities, because all the other probabilities are all the things a part of the magnetic. Let me show you on a chart here. Okay, let's get back up to this electric magnetic spectrum. Now, in quantum mechanics, the wave probability is all these things are there, just like all these frequencies are out there. And any one of these can happen or be observed. But guess what? Once you observe something, then you collapse the wave probability and you're only focused on that one thing. Like you're looking at the green light on your stereo. That's the only thing you're observing. And therefore, all the other possibilities are being seen at one point because you're observing it. That's called the observer effect. Everything else is possible. But for your personal reality, you're observing that particular frequency. And when you're observing it, you're causing what's called a resonance. You're resonating with that particular outcome or wave probability. So again, the observer effect is tuning into a particular frequency. And when it's tuned in, that tuning in with that frequency is resonance. And you're unified on that one thing, whether it's an idea or whatever. And feedback loops is really interesting too with reality. And feedback loops goes totally with law of attraction. You have a law of attraction and feedback loops. What it is, law of attraction is a feedback loop. In other words, you know, when you focus on something, you bring more of it. Well, when you're seeing your reality and, you know, let's say you're poor, you got nothing. Now you want to create wealth. This is new age teaching here, is when you're focused on something, believing in and having the intent of feeling, you're attracting it, right? And once you start seeing a manifestation, your five senses tell you, oh yeah, it's working, right? Well, reality is giving you a feedback loop to sending you the verification that, yeah, you're on the right track. It's working. And so then it gives you more, as they would say, belief that it is working. So therefore it becomes stronger. And then feedbacks. Now, feedback loop works with sound. You know, when you put a microphone up to a speaker, you hear that nasty squeal, that pitch. It's a feedback loop. There's a certain pitch, though, because both the mic and the sound, they resonate at a particular frequency that both of them can identify that has maximum energy. So they focus on. In other words, something that gets your attention will be the loudest or the brightest or the coldest or the hottest or the most distasteful or the most smelliest. That's what that is, the maximum resonance of that sensation. And therefore you smell it and it's a feedback loop and you get more of it. Well, when the speaker, it becomes real loud because both the mic and the speaker resonate the greatest energy at that particular frequency. And it keeps feedback in there too. Just like a video, if you put a video screen up, a camera up to your video, you must have seen this before. Or best, yeah, you put a mirror against mirror. This is a video feedback loop. and it keeps going on forever. It keeps going on forever. It keeps repeating because it's feedbacking itself. So, in other words, faith is the things, substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. So, in other words, you're believing for something, you're believing for a healing. You see it in your mind, you're picturing it. Jesus says, speak it and believe it, and you'll have it. So when you believe it, you don't listen to the doctor's report. For example, Joe has cancer. Doctor said, "Oh, Joe, guess what? I got some bad news for you." "Oh, what, doc? You have cancer." "What?" "And yeah, you got cancer, boy." Now that patient, he can receive that information because everything is information saying, "Oh, he's got cancer." But if he believes the word of God, the Bible, that Jesus healed him, he'll if he believes that, what he's doing, he's terminating feedback loop, because the feedback loop is, oh, doctor said a cancer, I could see it, I could feel the pain of it, therefore it's real. Therefore, if I believe this more than what the word of God says, then that cancer will stay because I'm believing it. I'm keeping it feedbacking. But if you believe the word of God, what you're doing, you're pulling the microphone away from the speaker. You're not getting any more feedback. You get silence from that. And therefore, if you pull the mic away from the speaker, you're not giving energy to that thought, that information, and you're not allowing it to live anymore, because remember, motion or vibration is energy, and you're keeping alive through the law of flow. So when you pull the mic back, you terminate the feedback of that feedback from the mic to speaker. It doesn't exist anymore. Well, in your mind, if you just believe the word of God that Jesus says you're healed, you believe that information that the cancer is gone, then what happens is you're creating a new feedback loop. You're believing with your mind first, believing the word of God, and that power of the Holy Spirit, which is energy, he will bring that about. And as you believe, and then it's manifested, then you see it in your reality. You feel your body, no more pain, the cancer's gone. And now you created a new feedback loop. And what that is the feedback loop of divine health. You're healthy, and you observe that, and you keep it going that way. And that's walking by faith. But faith first starts believing something that is not a part of his reality. Your mind is programmed to work on feedback loops, and your memory too. Like, in other words, all your past experiences that you go through, all your negative experiences, is a feedback of the past affecting your reality. A person who's been, beaten up or hijacked or whatever, whenever they come across some similar experience not happening like that, then they get traumatized by it because it brings back that memory, and that memory is real to them. And so they're expecting that to happen. But person never experienced that trauma. They go through the same thing like person B. They don't feel that trauma or not scared of it because they never experienced it. And they're not keeping that feedback loop going. So again, feedbacks are part of, let me get back to my terminology here. Feedback loops come from the law of attraction, and it's like entanglement of what you perceive and what it is. So you got to break off the entanglement, but these things are coming, And of course, the supply and demand, comes in effect too. And then agreement, that's a part of resonance, because when information or frequency, if you're on the same frequency, you're in agreement. And focus is the same thing as resonance. When you focus on something, it's part of the law of attraction because you're attracting it because you're focused on one theme. But it's a part of resonance because you're tuned into a particular frequency, or the observer effect is done by focus as well. So you see how these terminologies are coming in. Synchronicity is events happening in reality, but what you're doing, you're having something these synchronicities are in agreement because there's a focus on it, and the law of attraction's kicking in because of that, and that information is entangled, and you're observing that, and that synchronicity is a feedback loop of different parts of your reality coming together. And now the law of unity is simply in a place of agreement, is a place of power. And that gets back to Tesla talking about energy. And the greater the unity, the greater the energy. The greater the agreement, the greater the energy. And if you're focused, all focused on the same thing, you have agreement, again, greater energy. And then when you're in a group of people, momentum is gained when everybody's on the same page. There's more energy in the room. Whether you go to a party and everybody's having a great time, they're all focused on somebody doing something stupid or dancing because they're all on the same page, or they're feeding into it. You got the performer and the crowd. When the performer's making the crowd happy, they're agreeing with that entertainment. They love it, and they give a response, and the performer picks up on that, and it's a feedback loop and gets more energy, more of the, as they would say, the party spirit, So again, and they're all attracting each other because they like the same thing. And that's how that works there. And I already discussed the law of diffusion. But unity is at a place of agreement, which is the more focus you're on something, the greater the energy it is. And that's resonance. And frequency is just everything out there. But then when you focus on it, you're making that particular frequency resonate. When somebody says, I resonate with that idea, again, information, So let's get back to what I said in the very beginning. Frequency equals information. Information equals resonance and vibration. Frequency is sort of like all the information that you could perceive in your reality. That's why frequency and information are equal here. But resonance is a part of information. It's a particular information, a particular object that you see, or a particular sound that's resonating with you, a particular idea. That's called resonance. You're tuning in on a particular frequency, and a particular frequency is a particular vibration as well. So all these terms are interconnected. And when you look at everything that you perceive your reality, we could use a common denominator as information. And as you look at a computer, all the information of a computer is summed up as being 1 and 0. 1 is the light switch is on, and 0 is the light switch is off. That's the most basic form of information. You can't get anything lower than that. Your information in itself is pixelated. The lamp is on or the lamp is off. And you could either say the lamp is there or the lamp is not there. That's a here in existence or not in existence. That's another on and off. Now you could say the lamp is red. It's so tall. What that is, there's more information added to the description of the lamp, not as far as existence or if it's turned on and off. So really, the more information there is, the more resolution. When you look at a picture, when you see like a pixelated picture, what's happening is there's not much information because that's a small file size. There's not that many ones and zeros supplying it with information. But if you see a nice, detailed, high-resolution graphic, trust me, that picture size is very large, much larger than your little thumbnail that's on your Facebook or something like that. So the more information there is, the more ones and zeros digital information has to make it. So that's called pixelation. It's same thing with audio. When you have a real high quality audio, there's a lot more information. It's a fatter MP3 size than something that's a real low where it sounds like Stephen Hawking's voice. That's an 8-bit. But the audio we listen to is 16-bit or 24-bit. Much more information, therefore it sounds more clarity. So again, everything is information. That's both the video and audio. And then the last thing before I jump off here, I don't know if everybody listens to this, but the nature of reality, we live in a pixelated reality. People talk about simulation, which in a sense it is simulated, as you would technically say it, but it's real, of course. You don't want to get in a car accident because you'll be dead. You can't desimulate that. It's reality, as they would say. But look at a computer. You know how you could, let's say you delete a Word document, you could bring it back in, no problem. You could create documents or you have backup, right? But what happens if a particular piece of information that makes your computer work gets corrupted? Like your operating system, when you get the blue screen of death. Oh no, my computer won't boot up. I lost everything. That'll kind of make your heart wrench, your gut feel tight. Or if you have a hard drive and all that information of Fufu, your family pet, all those pictures that you have only in one drive, and all of a sudden gets deleted, and you can't recover it, it's lost forever. And it reminds me of a scripture: no man knows the day or the hour that your hard drive will crash. It may crash tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, maybe 10 or 20 years from now. But that information will eventually succumb to natural circumstance. So today's a day of salvation for your information. So what you do is back it up, save it. So if that drive does crash, you have Fufu's information. There's wonderful picture that you always go back to one at a time. So bringing that in there. So, but like I'm saying, it's like reality. If those pictures are deleted and you can never recover them, it's like you getting in a car accident and dying. You can't bring that person back from the dead unless God makes it happen. So that's what the real reality is. You can't edit that. Virtual reality is basically saying it's editable, just like your computer. Yeah, you can edit things. You can edit a Word document. If you can't pay your bills, you can edit your reality by going and getting governmental assistance of make that. That's cool. That's virtual. You start believing things, bring it into effect. But basically, it's all edible. But you get Fufu. If your pet Fufu gets ran over by a truck and squished, all of a sudden, no, he's dead. I can't do nothing about it. You can't change it. That's like the terror of a defaulted reality. If you jump off a cliff and you ain't got no wings there, Clarence. I mean, Clarence got his ring when the bell rang. But if he ain't got no wings, you're falling to the ground. And depending on how high the Humpty Dumpty fall you have, you're going to be dead. And you can't edit that. I mean, that's quote permanent, But then again, if you get stabbed and then the hospital comes, rescues you, the ambulance comes, you get medical attention, and after a while you get healed, and then that stabbing isn't as frightening because it's kind of an edible reality, even though the defaults go through this stitching up and your body's healing itself. So that's why this reality is virtual, just like a computer. But there's certain things, if you screw with it, it's a permanent change and you can't reverse it. That's where the understanding is getting confused with this thing. But we created computer to imitate reality. Think about it. A computer could do everything. It simulate everything within your reality. Pictures, music, everything. We haven't gotten into the feel and taste yet, but if they can interface a computer directly into the human brain, trust me, you can have a reality within your brain being delivered by electronic sensors hooked up to your brain, just like Because think about all five senses, like I said before, are five different languages. So instead of having the sight, sound, smell, taste, and feel transmit this information to your brain electrically, why not directly interface to a computer and then have it transmitted that way? And then, you know, and then your brain will eventually interpret it as being real. In other words, when you were born, before you were born, let's take this synopsis. Think about this. Say you were, you're in your mother's womb, right? You're in your mother's womb, and you were born without sight, without hearing, without taste, without smell. We've knocked out four senses, and you could survive without that. And for some reason, you can't even feel any part of your body, but yet your brain is allowed to keep your body running, like the heart, the lung, and all that. And so when you're born, when you're detached from the umbilical cord, then the doctors hook you up to, like, a feeding tube so you can feed, and then, catheters and everything. So your body's able to do its normal function to keep your brain alive. But yet your brain has absolutely no sensory perception. What would their consciousness be inside that brain? It never knew sight, never knew sound, never knew feeling, never knew taste, never knew smell, and then lived like that for years. Say the person grew from an infant to like a 30 or 40-year-old man. They just kept that individual alive. And to the world, they will look like that they're unconscious, but they're fully conscious within their mind or thinking. What would their reality be like with no information? You try to explain to them what sound is, they have no idea. They don't know what sight is. They don't know what taste. They don't know what feel. What would their reality be like? No information. I mean, you can't even assign darkness or silence to it because they wouldn't even know what that perception of that is. That's something to really think about, because you think about that kind of brings you down to like how blessed we are having our five senses. And the number of five is grace, that God's given us grace. So he's given us the five given, right? So that's just something to think about. So getting back to that, now if you plugged in a machine where it could send electrical impulses to the brain, the various impulses, then your brain will start interpreting that, and then you can create a reality. So that's some. And then people got things where you could experience, where they could experience some different. But I think I've gone on for a long time here. You could call this thinking out loud. I love thinking about these things, and I was making this video, audio video, because I just want to rattle off some of these things. So you see where I'm connecting the dots here: frequency, resonance, law of supply and demand, the law of flow or movement, law of diffusion, law of attraction, quantum entanglement, observer effect, feedback loops, agreements, focus, synchronicity, and everything. This all has to do with frequency. So, you hear a new ager saying, or people saying, "Oh, brother, you need to go and you need to elevate yourself to a higher frequency." And when they say move to a higher frequency, what is that? To me, frequency is sight or sound or something. So I said, why don't we exchange the word frequency for information? In other words, to go from a low information or lower frequency of hate and anger to a higher frequency of peace, love, and joy. That's basically your perceptual information of reality. So it's basically called information. And whatever channel you tune to, whether it's love or hate, that's a particular channel, right? Frequency, you're tuning in different radio station, the radio station of love instead of radio station of hate. You're resonating at that channel. So as you focus on love, that's where the word of God comes in, because when you meditate on the word, it's just being transformed by the renewing your mind, and you'll be known what the good, acceptable, perfect will of God is by focusing on what the word of God says, which is the truth. And that's what you want, because you focus on the good things, then your reality will start improving. Be thankful for what you have. You're appreciating it. See what happens when you're not thankful. You have too much supply, and then, in other words, I'm not thankful for this house. I see it every day. I live in it. Yeah, I have my old car. I'm not thankful for that because I have it every day. Hey, you get tired of it. I'm not thankful for my friend because I see him all the time. I take him for granted. See, when you take something for granted, it means it's always been there. There's a huge supply of it. Isn't that correct? When you take it something for granted, there's a huge supply of that, whatever it is that you take for granted. But guess what, buddy? If that car gets repoed and that home is foreclosed, and you're out in the street and you're walking, oh, you have a whole different aspect. You'll be like, oh man, where's my car? I love that car. Now I value that car. Why? Because I don't have it no more. I value that home because I'm living in the street, don't have a house. So all of a sudden, because the supply of that home is gone, therefore you have a great demand for it, and that's what's happening. Same with a car. It's gone. So you have a great demand because you got no wheels. So therefore, you know, that's law of supply and demand. So again, when you're tired of it, sick of it, you take it for granted. That's the reason why the Bible says give thanks for everything. Basically, the Bible's telling you, if you're thankful for everything, you appreciate it, what you're doing, you're bringing value to it. When you appreciate it and realize, and you could just take a introspective, like imagine what will happen if whatever you have that you take for granted is no longer yours. Think about that. That creates like a void in your mind for the moment where I don't have it anymore because I'm thinking about it. Then you have appreciation, you give thanks for it, and that adds values to it. Being thankful for anything adds value. In other words, when somebody hands you $100 bill, you say, well, thank you, sir. And the person's giving you $100 bill, he'll feel that because when you say thank you, what you're doing, you're showing appreciation for that $100 bill, and you're putting a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling by being thankful. That's what God just wants from us. He's given us everything, but what we got to do, that's the reason why the Bible says, return to your first love. That's the bottom line. If we understand how much Jesus given us, he's given us life and life abundantly, eternal life, a perfect life. When you realize how much he's given you, then as you realize that he first loved you, so guess what? Once you realize and understand the word, the truth, then you can love him, not because you have to or because, oh, I'm a sinner and I got to love God or I got to do this or do that to make God happy. No, you just thank him for what he's done for you. And now that heart of thankfulness produces the love that God wants from all of us out of free will. It's all done by free will. Okay. So again, being thankful is adding value, is putting a demand on the appreciation of what you're focusing on, giving thanks. So that's how that works in there. Pretty cool. So anyhow, with the information, like getting back where I was on the information a while ago, as you take the information of word, and as you think about these things, you can't think one thing and think another thing at the same time. If you're being thankful, at that moment you're feeling thankful, you'll never feel upset or lacking because you got it all, brother. You got it all with Jesus Christ. So that's why I want to say all this is to sum up one thing. God is the creator of all things. God has created the human mind, the human brain, the human soul, the human spirit. God has created our reality. God has created everything. And what's so cool is we think this is all vast and big and large and infinite. But you know what? Think about this. We're like flies stuck on fly paper. We only see one sliver of reality. We only see one particular frequency in our whole reality. But God encompasses the infinity of all things. And God sees everything at the same time. God sees all the time, all the time. In other words, he sees Moses taking his feet off, the sandals off his feet, as well as this broadcast right now. To God, all things are now. It's the ever present now. And so that's where the power of focus is. The past doesn't exist. It once existed in the ever present now, but doesn't exist. And the future will exist when our ever present now is at that particular futuristic time. But our reality is based on now, from moment to moment. This is our reality. There's nothing more or less than the here and now. So that's why I was saying we're stuck on flypaper. The flypaper may be a long roll of the eternal past and eternal future, but we're just stuck on that one piece of paper. And God can move in and out of time because he's not stuck on it. And he could do all things because he's all powerful, because he's outside reality. To him, we are a simulated program. It's the reason why the miracles that God does, it's instant. It's nothing. It's like a chicken wing to him. It means he could do things instantly because we are in the simulation and he's the master who's, the guy behind the computer screen, as you would say. That's why as a program, before you were born, he already had you in his program before you were born, and he had you mapped out. And all he wants you to do is just to receive him, and he'll give you the roadmap. And when you operate in his plans, you are resonating with the Almighty. And when you resonate with the Almighty, you are at your resonance, your peak of what you're designed and created for. And we're all created and designed for his good pleasure. That's what he takes pleasure in, is in us. The good pleasure. We resonate with God. Once we get in his word, his program, his plan, we resonate because we're focused on that information that he wants designed specifically for us. We're all assigned a certain frequency, a certain channel. What we have to do is know what channel we're supposed to be on. Once we tune into that channel that God has laid out for us, then we'll resonate and things will come easily. We'll have the joy, peace, life, everything. No matter what happens, you'll be on that channel. And as we stay on that channel, focus, we're in agreement with God and it's powerful. And we have the law of unity working for us, which is unified, which even more power, and everything will be synchronized. God will supply all of our needs. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And we'll be entangled into that observer effect, and the law of attraction will keep attracting more of God's plan because we're on his page, and it'll just be awesome. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking for an hour and 23 minutes and 13 seconds. So let me jump off. Again, is this not really anything? I'm just thinking out loud. This is what's going through my head. But again, getting back to the bottom line, the flow of life, the pattern of everything. These are patterns that all these things work within. Like numbers, like the divine proportions. Again, of course, the Almighty, the great I am. He's the one that uses that divine pattern. It's called the golden ratio. It's in everything, which is pretty cool. And I really believe that God, like I said before, we're in his simulation. Like he's real and our consciousness is real. Our soul, our spirit is real, and everything else is just a program, okay? Just like a computer, like I said earlier. If you screw up with a particular file that doesn't make your computer operate or delete a program which you can't recover, that's sort of like you getting killed in an auto accident. So when people talk about virtual realities, they're thinking, oh, well, hell, I can run my head in the wall. It's virtual. I'm going to be, yeah, you'll be dead because it's a default that you can't change, okay? But God is the one who runs the whole simulation reality. He could change anything anytime. But if we get on his channel, his page, then we can do what exactly wants and will prosper. So again, just like a computer, we're in God's reality. So God bless you. Thank you for joining me and have a great night. God bless you all.